Well, hello, lovely folks. Amy Joy here, and I am here to bring you some information on motivation theories and what drives us to do what we do and say what we say and set the goals and the trajectory of our lives the way that we do. So I'm going to bring up my screen and we're going to go over. Um, we're going to go over. Here we go. Let's try that one. Share. So we're gonna see what we can do here with motivation theory. And we're gonna start right about, not there, right about here. So I guess we can ask ourselves, what exactly does it mean to be motivated? Like what drives us to do the things we do, to and honestly, motivation is internal, right? So it comes from internal drives as well as external drives. We're going to talk about that in just a minute here. I can figure out what the heck I'm doing from current slide. There we go. So I'm going to keep my little screen up here with you guys so that I can continue to talk to you. And I'm going to put that right about there. So really, we have to begin with, what is motivation? How do we define it? It's that thing that moves us from one place to the next, right? It's that thing that says, I'm going to do this instead of that. And that's what motivation um, basically is, right? What are those things that we're talking about? So we're going to move over here. So we're going to talk about what is intrinsic motivation and what is extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation, anytime you see that it's going to be from the inside, right? So it's those innate drives. It is those inner thoughts, feelings, and it's often our unconscious drives that push us forward or backward or sideways, basically into those things that we ultimately decide to do. So when we talk about intrinsic, a lot of times it's habitual. It's things that we have done over and over and over again. It's often unconscious, so we don't often notice that those drives are happening. But at the same time, we sometimes will pay attention to those intuitive nudges, right? So actually Maslow's called those tacit knowing. It was basically it's your intuition, it's your gut telling you either go this way or don't go this way. Take this job, don't take this job, or I'm getting a funny feeling from this or that. I'm going to leave this party, I'm going to stay and drink, whatever. Although I don't know that your intuition would tell you to stay and drink anywhere. But intuition is part of those intrinsic motivations. They're innate. They're also what tells us what our greatest purpose and drive and passion in life is. So having an intrinsic or innate drive and purpose is knowing that there's something out there that's bigger than ourselves. That all comes from internal, intuitive knowing. So, and it's sometimes conscious and it's sometimes not so conscious. So we have to pay attention to that. Extrinsic motivation comes from the outside. Every time you see that X before the word, it's going to be from the outside. So, extrinsic motivation, oftentimes this happens culturally, it happens in society, it happens in our families. So it's a part of cultural and societal expectations and norms. And these extrinsic motivating factors can, be from a variety of different areas. We're going to actually talk about that in just a minute here. If I can get, there we go. I keep moving my face all over the place, so hopefully this shows up right. So some different theories I want to go over. Let's start with social constructivists. So the early psychologists, so there were five main, what they call fathers of psychology. So that's Pavlov, Ivan Pavlov, and we'll talk about his dog in just a moment. Of course, Freud, who came out with some, what they thought was really wacky stuff at the time. And he kind of got slammed for it. And then he changed his position, became a little more moderate. But he was right on from the beginning. So if you want to know more about him, he's a very interesting guy. Maybe we'll have another lecture on just Freud. And then, of course, we have William James, who he was late 1800s, early 1900s, and he was all about instinct. And then, of course, we have Carl Jung and Abraham Maslow, and I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. So there's Freud, Pavlov, James, Maslow, and Jung. So those are our 5 main psychologists, where basically everybody else's theories that came after that have been based on these major theoretical foundations and psychologists. Now, to go back in time, we have to actually, they didn't necessarily all belong in one camp or another, but they took bits and pieces from other theories, especially Maslow. So, social constructivists basically believe that all motivation and drive comes from our social environment. It's all driven by the family you're born in, the community you live in, the people who you surround yourself with, the government that you are under. Um, and it's basically everything that we do, think, feel comes from the outside, right? It comes from our social experiences. Um, and then achievement theory kind of belongs underneath the social constructivism, which it says, you know what, I'm driven by status, power, achievement, and most people are to a degree part of this drive to achieve, especially in the United States, because that has been sort of our cultural norm is who's got the most education, the most money, the biggest house, that type of thing. I think things are starting to shift a little bit, hopefully, but who knows? I'm not sure if they're shifting in the right direction. So we'll leave that for another day. So that's your basics on social constructivism. So let's move on to our motivation theory when it comes to motivational drive theory. So trying to move my face around here. There we go. It's an attempt to maintain what's already there, right? So it's our need for what we would call homeostasis. I'm going to bring myself back to center. So if I get too far off this way, my internal and external drives are going to be like, no, you need to come back to center. You need to come back to the middle. If I get too far off this way, and then, pulling you back this way. And oftentimes we actually do see this play out, particularly social economic wise. So people who are born into poverty often remain in poverty. And there's a variety of different factors of why that is. But a big part of it is that poverty, what you associate and what you're familiar with as you grow up, what your brain is primed to accept as the norm, often becomes the innate, the unconscious, the driving factor underneath where you remain. So as an adult, you're like, why the heck am I still poor? I've got all these external things that I'm pouring into myself. I'm saying positive affirmations and I'm doing all of these things. That I can possibly do to get ahead. But if their unconscious and internal drives are saying, people with money are awful, it doesn't matter what they say, they're the scourge of society, then, we've got these combating drives, if you will. So the internal is not matching up with the external, but we often will make ourselves, or not make ourselves, but keep ourselves within a comfort zone, within what's familiar. So getting out of poverty is going to be very difficult if you don't understand what your previous experience was, how that primed you to continue where you are, and the internal voice that you have going on. So being aware of these things, consciously aware of the things that we think, feel, and do is very, very important. So homeostasis, it can be a really good thing if you're already in a thriving business, if you love the life that you have and you want to maintain this, then motivational drive theory says, you know what, we're here to help you do that. Or this is why you're doing that. But for most people, they don't want to remain static. They would like to improve their lives in some way or another. So motivational drive theory is a really good one to explain why we stay stuck in the crap that we do. All right. So motivational drive theory when it comes to self-determination. So I believe they came out in the 70s. Richard Ryan and Edward, I think it's Decky or Desai or something like that. They came up with a self-determination theory that says motivation is innate and determined by relatedness, competence, and autonomy. So what they did is they took that social constructivist theory, and they took that innate theory, those motivational drive theories, and we'll talk about Maslow in just a minute, but this is part of Maslow as well. But relatedness, they're talking about how well we relate, how what kind of relationships we have with ourselves, with others, with the companies we work with the organizations that we interact with every day. That's relatedness, right? So how well we are in relationship with, and then fill in the blank. Competence is how well, how efficient and successful you are, either in business, in life, in family, whatever the case might be. So self-determination theory says we're taking those relationships, we're taking your level of confidence and competence into consideration when it comes to the decisions you make. So self-determination means basically I'm making choices for myself based on how well I would like to interact with others, how competent or how successful I would like to be in certain areas, and do I have the freedom to actually do those things? Do I have, so autonomy means I've got the freedom to act out the things that I think are important. And that, of course, includes also relatedness and competence. So self-determination theory is a relatively, I'm not going to say new, but it's newish on the, compared to our founding psychologists. So yeah, we'll move on here. So Pavlov's dog. So Pavlov was straight up a behaviorist. He believed that, and I'll move this because you can see his little face there. So Pavlov believed that all motivation came from conditioning. I'm going to reward or punish, and based on those conditions, right? So conditional behaviors and things like that are based on I'm going to do this one thing and it's going to condition you to respond this way, whether it's coming or not, whether you see it's coming or not. So Pavlov basically tricked his dog into thinking that every time a bell rang, he was going to get food. So because he was conditioned to hear the bell, get the food, right? And over time, all he had to do, Ivan Pavlov had to do, was ring the bell and the dog would salivate. He conditioned the dog to have a physical, biological response to something that wasn't there. There was no food there, but his body was like, oh my gosh, there's food here. And there wasn't. So he conditioned him to have a biological, physical response. So that's behaviorism. We don't have a ton of those in today's theory, but we often see that happening in schools, right? We condition kids, you hear the bell, you get up and you go, you hear the bell again, oops, you're late. That's all conditioning. And it does create some sort of anxiety within yourself. So I think I advanced the slide a little too early. So William James, again, he was, okay, so from till 1910, I believe that all behavior was instinctual. So babies rooting for mother's milk, that's instinctual. Mothers giving birth, right? You don't have to tell a woman when to push, it just happens. And that's a biological instinctual response as well. So what William James did not put in there was the neurobiological and chemical reactions that are happening within each of these experiences. So, we are instinctually conditioned to, not conditioned, we instinctually pull our hand away from a hot stove, right? If we touch something hot, we pull it back. We don't have to think about it. It's just something that happens. But that happens because the nerves in your hand have registered in your brain, pain, hurt, right? Something bad is happening to the skin, to the body. So we need to change that immediately. Babies rooting for mama's milk is, hunger. That's a biological response. But William James believed that everything that we do is instinctual. And to a degree, he's absolutely right. It's what's kept us alive for eons. And nobody agrees basically on how long humans have been here, but whatever. So as long as we have been here, we have had instinctual nuances that help us survive, and it just is what it is. So that is absolutely a part of motivation. And it's a part of this. So I'm gonna move my little face here once more. So when it comes to Maslow, what he did is he combined a ton of different theories together. So he combined Freud, Alfred Adler. Oh, he's another big guy at the same time. So he combined basically behaviorist, social construction theory, psycho sexual dynamics, and the humanistic approach. And humanism is basically a holistic approach to psychology, right? To the existence of human beings. We look at humans not as compartments and different pieces, but as a whole, right? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, if you will. So we've got the constructivists, we've got the behaviorists, we've got achievement theorists, we've got all sorts of different pieces. And Maslow said, we're just going to kind of put all of these things together, because what he realized over time was that people are driven by internal and external factors. And beginning with the bottom rung of this pyramid, those first three at the bottom are actually what we call deficiency needs, because if you're deficient in these needs, it causes what we call dis-ease, whether that's a physical, emotional, biological abnormality, or just not functioning in the normal range. So when it comes to our needs, Abraham Maslow said we need to start with the physiological. So that's food, water, sleep, shelter. So we need to keep our physical body alive. So that's important. So having the proper nutrition, sleep, all of these things contribute to how well we function in society. And once those physiological needs are satisfactorily met, so keep in mind, as we're looking at this pyramid, you do not have to meet these things to 100%, right? You don't have to be completely full all the time. You don't have to sleep 12 hours a day. Right, that wouldn't necessarily be healthy unless you're an infant. But you get the idea. So in that range of satisfaction and adequacy, usually there's a typical range for all humans, what that looks like. But it does differ based on, one person to the next. Some people need a whole lot more sleep. Some people need 4 hours of sleep. So it just depends on your need. Once that need is satisfactorily met, then we're looking for safety. And safety is not just an act of, I'm physically safe in this building, in this classroom, in this home, in this neighborhood. These are not things that are just our physical surrounding. I'm just going to make a little note here. I'm going to add some ACEs to this presentation. So safety also belongs in the emotional and psychological camp, right? So if I'm not physically or emotionally or psychologically safe, then I am not functioning optimally. It's going to be very, very difficult to get to love and belonging and esteem and self-actualization without actually reaching an element of safety. So when we often talk about people who are stuck in domestic violence relationships, kids who are stuck in child abuse situations, obviously these things are fundamental to our safety. So if you're stuck in a situation where you don't feel safe, you're not necessarily processing information. You're not functioning very well. You might have outbursts. You might be diagnosed with ADHD or autism or PTSD or some other things that are happening in the moment. But in order to get out of this not feeling safe or not being safe, because those are, right, if you're in an abusive situation, you're physically not safe and you're emotionally, mentally not safe. So in order to function optimally, right, you have to physically get out of that space first, and then deal with the mental and emotional insecurity that is going on. So love and belonging. We were designed for connection. We were designed for relationship. We were designed to belong somewhere to something. So love and belonging is a really big issue. They did a study, I'm going to say it was out of Russia years and years and years ago, probably almost 100 years ago now, maybe 80-ish. I think it was in the 40s. They took a bunch of orphan babies and basically they decided to experiment. They decided that they weren't going to talk to them, hold them, touch them. They basically changed them and fed them, and that was it. Most of the babies died, or they what it's called failure to thrive. Right? They did not advance in age or intellect. They basically the toddlers became very like infants again. So, and those are for those who didn't pass away. We were designed for love and connection and belonging, relatedness, relationship with others. So, and here's the thing, if you're getting that love and belonging and a sense of community from really unhealthy people, and a lot of times unhealthy people attract unhealthy people, right? It's what we're familiar with. We talked about that already. Then we've got a level of functioning that's not going to help us advance in life. So we need to intentionally, consciously be aware of who's around us and what kind of relationship is being poured into our lives. Because if your relationships, if your love and belonging is not coming from a safe, healthy place, it's coming from an unsafe, unhealthy place, because we don't thrive very well without this piece. So we've seen a huge shift in this love and belonging piece over the last few years. When it came to the COVID thing and everybody locked down, everybody's in their house, right? This disappeared. And now that we've become so tribalistic, we've become, everybody's picking their camps with different things. This is also an issue. Because if your camp is very unhealthy and doing illegal things and awful things and just absolutely abhors and hates all of humanity, this is a problem. So it doesn't help to forward your life or advance the human race in any way. So we've seen a shift in this, not just here in the United States, but globally. So these three that are on the bottom here, these are, again, they're called deficiency needs or D needs. And if you're deficient in any of them, it causes disease. If you're deficient in any kind of physiological issues, right? You don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough to eat. These are going to cause physiological issues. And possibly even death. And then safety, if you're deficient in safety, again, it actually causes biological responses, and over time can create some serious mental health and physical issues, diabetes and heart disease and all sorts of nasty, nasty things. So, and then love and belonging, again, if it's not healthy, it's unhealthy. So the people you have relationship with, the socialization that you do, the church that you go to, the groups you belong to, all of those things, pay attention to what they're saying and doing. And if it's pouring wonderful, good, awesome things into your life, or if it's making you feel like crap every day, they're like, it's nothing but drama and distraction and negativism. So be careful with that. So when it comes to esteem is basically how you value yourself, right? The kind of value you place on yourself as a human being and your place in society. Are you bringing value to your community, to your family, to yourself, to your life? And then self-actualization is sort of the next step. And I will say this, they all kind of blend together, right? So it's not just this isn't, a stair step of, oh, I've reached this one, so now I'm going to be on this rung, oh, I've reached this one, so now I'm going to be on this rung. It doesn't work that way. We all just kind of meld into one another. And there's a level and a range of functioning every single day with all of these things. Not everyone reaches the point of self-actualization. Self-actualization is actually that understanding and knowing that you are part of something bigger than yourself, that there is a greater purpose to your life. This is where we find people who are in the process of self-actualizing, because self-actualizing is not a noun. It's not a thing to be had. It is a process to be in. And so the process of being human, and being in the process of self-actualizing, means you are in the process of fulfilling your highest potential. And your highest potential, is again, it's not a noun. It's not a static thing. It's a thing that moves. And every time you reach sort of a next goal, you're like, okay, this is part of my purpose, and this is what I see coming next. This is what I would like to happen next in order to advance that higher goal. And once those things are achieved, then we continue to move forward and forward and forward, reaching and striving for our fullest potential. And we don't know what our fullest potential is. Hopefully we never know. I mean, hopefully I get to my deathbed and I'm still reaching for my fullest potential, but have achieved along the way such an incredible life of purpose and meaning that there was nothing left on the table. There was nothing left behind. So that's self-actualization. So Maslow went a little farther, actually, a little later, and I think this was in the 60s and 70s. It was just before his death. He was talking about peak experiences and how self-actualizing people who experience peak experiences. So peak experiences are those things that take us to sort of a supernatural level. We often count those as spiritual awakenings, or those moments in our life where it was very, very clear that our life was headed in one direction. Something happened, something was so profound that then we began to go in a different direction. So that is what Maslow called peak experiences, but that sends us into a process then of self-transcendence. So it's a much, much higher level of being. It's sort of where the self is forgotten and left behind, and the greater good, the greater purpose, whether you call that God or universe or energy or whatever the case might be, that becomes the known and you become the unknown. So you become part of this much bigger realm, if you will. So that's self-transcendence. That's peak experiences. So we might actually do a whole episode or lecture on just Maslow, because he's super duper interesting. So that's basically this. I really, you know what? I'm going to go back actually for a moment here. So of these things, I would say to you, right? And I'm going to explain it in a minute, but when we talk about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, Maslow said, you know what, we've got a combination of both, because here on the bottom where we've got love, belonging, safety, and physiological elements or factors, our D needs, these are extrinsically motivated. Much of this is I need to keep myself alive, safe, and in relationship. Right. So for healthy functioning, these are external. This is where we find our social constructivists. This is where we find our behaviorists. This is where we find all those folks who attribute motivational drives to very basic needs. So when it comes to internal, intrinsic, innate, however you want to put it, motivational drives, it's often what Maslow called tacit knowing. It's, I know that I know, but I'm not sure how I know. Carl Jung called this the collective conscious, that we're all connected with this. I don't think he said energy back then, but sort of we're all energetically connected in a way that we understand and know just intuitively that, this is what we should or should not be doing. And this is how we survive. And this is how we don't survive. This is how we function in society. This is how we don't function in society. So all of those things are innate. They're intuitive, a lot of times unconscious. So sometimes we don't quite understand why we're thinking or feeling or doing the things that we do, even though it is for a greater purpose, because we have not become consciously aware of those thoughts that's happening. And I would tell you, if your like, you know what? I've got all my physical needs taken care of. Everything is great. I feel relatively safe most of the time. That's not really an issue. Love and belonging. I've got great friends. I belong to good groups. There might be a bad patch here or there, whatever, but we're good. I feel good about who I am. I value myself and my place in society. And I really want to work through self-actualizing. And I would tell you, it has a lot to do with how we set our goals. And we set our goals based on what we feel passionate about, and what we feel passionate about are those things that when we get into a mode of being where we lose time, right? So athletes call it getting in the zone. Artists, we kind of lose sense of all reality, and time and space doesn't exist anymore. Those things, for me, it's teaching, right? I have no idea how long we've been going. But the passion that we have is part of our purpose. So if you have no idea what your passion is, or where the highest potential is, what is it you feel passionate about? What is it when you do something or you think about that thing, you are so incredibly excited and you have to do it over and over and over again, or you have to find a way to do it better, bigger, or whatever the case might be. That's where the highest potential is. So I would tell you, this has a lot to do with how you set goals and what goals that you set. So I will leave this here for now. Um, I'm not sure exactly how long we've been going, but this is your lecture on motivation theories, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys. Oh, I gotta stop sharing. Huh. There we go.